Mundo Ejecutivo presenta.
Hola amigos, bienvenidos a su programa 18 minutos. Soy Francisco Rodríguez Aguirre, presidente de Smart Speakers, el principal buró de conferencistas de Latinoamérica, y me acompaña mi gran amigo Mauricio.
Como siempre, un placer, Paco, bienvenidos y muy atentos. Hoy tenemos un súper tema y sobre todo de actualidad.
Así es, pues tenemos a un gran invitado, él es Sunnel Gupta, él es un emprendedor que fundó la app Rise, empresa líder de wellness que han ayudado a miles de ejecutivos a practicar mejores hábitos para su vida y el trabajo. Él también es profesor de la Escuela de Harvard de Salud. Por cierto, su empresa Rise se la vendió a Amazon. Hi, Sunnel. It's great having you with us.
Francisco, Mauricio, thank you for having me.
Well, the first question that I would like to ask is how can you be a great executive giving great results, but having a good life?
Yeah, it's a good question, Francisco, because for a very long time, we have sort of considered well-being and work to be two separate things, right? You have your work life, and then you have your life of well-being. And I think what we're beginning to realize, what the science is telling us, what the business and industry is telling us, is that these two things are not separate. They're actually related. Your well-being affects your work affects your well-being, and for too long we have ignored the fact that both are really essential for sustained success. So if you want to be a great executive, if you want to have your team perform at their highest level, you also have to invest in well-being. And sometimes that means being a good example for other people. It means learning how to take care of yourself. But that doesn't necessarily mean, Francisco, to slow down. It doesn't necessarily mean to become less ambitious or to not care as much about your work. You can actually be caring more about your work by investing in your well-being, because you know that when you feel good, you have good energy. And when you have good energy, you have good creativity, you have good imagination, you're more productive, and you're a better leader.
And Sunil, given the pandemic and these past 2 years, everything that we have lived and experienced, is my perception that leaders are more aware about the importance of wellness for themselves and for those who are their workers or collaborators. We usually talk about habits. In that regard, from your perspective, which are those habits we should be aware of when pursuing success in both personal, professional, specifically leadership areas?
Yeah. Mauricio, first of all, very, very good point. The past 2 years have really taught us quite a bit about ourselves and our businesses, and it's been a wake-up call for a lot of people. However, I would say that for the past really 20 years, there's been a very interesting trend happening in business where when we look at sort of what it is that we want, whether that be as leaders or whether that be as employees, it used to be that what we believed people wanted was compensation, right? They wanted compensation, good titles, good rewards, financial compensation. But over the past 20 years, we started to see that change a little bit. And what people every year started to want more of was inner success. They wanted to feel good. They want to feel fulfilled. They want to feel happy. And we were starting to see that it was starting to shift more from that inner success and happiness, more even than financial compensation and rewards. I think during the pandemic, that accelerated that. More people started to realize that I could have all the money in the world. I could have a fancy job title. I could be working a very good job. But if I don't feel good, if I feel burnt out, then that's not what I want either, right? So I want to be able to create and contribute very good work, but I also want to have well-being. And now as businesses and as leaders and executives, we have to figure out how to bring both of these things together. One of the habits that I think that great leaders seem to embody is what I call rhythmic renewal, where they're not waiting for vacations. They're not waiting for long breaks in order to restore and recover. What they're doing is they're taking multiple breaks every single day throughout the day. In fact, I know, Francisco, we've talked about this. The average high performer, whether that be in sports, whether that be in business, whether that be in music or the arts, is taking somewhere around 8 breaks every single day. 8 breaks, which, I know sounds really remarkable, right? I mean, given the world we're living in, it seems like sometimes we're clicking off of one link, clicking onto another, clicking off that link, clicking onto another. But what's happening is that really, really strong performers take 5-minute breaks in between these meetings. And they do what I call the 55-5 model, where for every 55 minutes of work, they're taking 5 minutes to recover, to rest. And that can really be doing anything. You could be taking a walk, you could be breathing, you could be meditating, you could be listening to music, but you're taking 5 minutes in between each of these meetings, even in order to really reset and come back to yourself.
Sunnel, can you give us some examples of the best people that use this technique to give the best results?
Yeah. I mean, you would think that this would be more sort of tech entrepreneurs and musicians. And for my last book, I studied Oscar-winning filmmakers, celebrity chefs, leaders of large iconic companies. And these are people who are all sort of realizing that when it comes to recovery, it's one thing to think about duration, right? It's one thing to think about the number of hours that you take off in order to recover. But it's another thing to think about frequency, right? How frequently am I actually taking time to reset and recover? And what I realized after studying hundreds of extraordinary leaders is they think about both. There's nothing wrong with taking long vacations, but you also need these little frequent bursts of recovery in between in order to keep resetting yourself. One of the reasons that this is important, Francisco, Mauricio, one of the reasons this is very critical is because when we communicate with each other, we are communicating both verbally and non-verbally. But what the science tells us is that 80% of our communication is actually non-verbal. It has very little to do with what I'm saying. It has more to do with how I'm saying it. Right? And if your energy is low, if you're burnt out, if you're exhausted, the way that we're going to communicate with each other isn't going to be at the level that we need in order to succeed at the highest, reach our highest potential.
Well, that sounds very, very useful, Sunnel. What makes me think about if I decide to approach and embrace the 8 breaks technique, which are those first steps you would suggest me to implement in my personal life, professional life? How to start in this journey?
Absolutely.
And
so,
for sure, I assume it's fee or a free fee for fees, no?
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, Mauricio, such a good question, right? How do we begin? How do we start? And, if 5-minute breaks are too hard because you're right now, you're so back to back, then I say start with 30 seconds. Literally start with 30 seconds. We have these moments where we finish one thing and we immediately, our impulse is to start the next thing right away. The way to begin is literally by just starting to create little transitions, little moments in between each thing. And it can be as simple as just literally taking, one of my favorite things, Mauricio, we can do it together right now. Literally place your hand over your heart. You can do this with me. Place your hand right over your heart. Right? And we're just going to we're going to allow our eyes to close, and we're just going to take 3 breaths. Okay? Allow your eyes to close and take a deep breath in, deep breath out. In, out. Last one. In, out. And then slowly allow your eyes to open and come back to this moment. You see what a difference that can make?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
powerful.
Great. Yes.
Oh, thanks for that.
Yeah.
This is a very good idea for those who are now watching us and following us. Thank you.
Thank you. Sunnel, you as well have another great technique, which is the 5 minutes to focus in something. Can you explain us about this technique, please?
Yeah. One of the best part of my job is getting to study great leaders, and what I really try to focus on is really understanding sort of what are their habits, right? And so besides what we're seeing externally, what are they doing internally in order to make themselves better leaders? And there was one executive that I was studying. He had this reputation. He leads thousands of people, big financial services company based in New York. But what made him unique is that he had a reputation of really being calm, very calm under pressure, right? Mm-hmm. So when I spoke to the board of the company, when I spoke to all of the teams that he leads, that was what I continued to hear over and over again, is that he has a really amazing ability to stay calm even during the most stressful situations. And I wanted to understand how does he do it? And one of the things I realized is that sitting on his desk was a sand timer. Actually, I have one right here on my desk. A sand timer, mm-hmm. Right? Very simple. And I asked him, what's the deal with the sand timer? And what he said to me is that every time he is going through a very tough situation, every time he's worried about something, he has a concern, what he'll do is he'll go into his office, he'll shut the door, he'll take this 5-minute sand timer, and he'll turn it. Mm-hmm. And for the next 5 minutes, all he will do is focus on that one worry, focus on that one concern. Right? Mm-hmm. When the 5 minutes is up, he goes on with the rest of his day. And I asked him, how does that work? Because it would seem to me that if you spend 5 minutes focusing on a worry, it's going to make that worry more pronounced. Mm-hmm. You're going to worry about it even more. Mm-hmm. But what the science tells us is that if we can spend 5 minutes focusing on a worry, on a concern, what that actually does is it turns the volume down on the worry, right? Mm-hmm. Not up, but it turns it down. Mm-hmm. And the reason that happens is because oftentimes what begins as a whisper inside our head, if you try to ignore it, it grows into a sound, and then eventually it grows into a shout, right? Mm-hmm. So the more you ignore something, the louder that voice becomes. And the louder that voice becomes, the harder it is to be present with all of the other things that are happening in your life, with your work, with your family. You're constantly sort of thinking about that thing. But if you can spend 5 minutes really just focusing on that one worry, again, it doesn't solve the problem necessarily, but what it does is it turns down the volume so that you can be more present with the other parts of your day.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I really value a lot all the ideas you are sharing with us in this opportunity, Sunnel. Tell us more about the approach you have in your book. For those that are not that familiar with your book, which are the main topics that you manage on it?
The name of your book is
reliable?
No, it's backable, no? Isn't it?
Yeah. So what I'm so interested in is really, I play a little game with my daughters every morning, and we do this every day. We started doing this during the pandemic. I have a 10-year-old and I have a 6-year-old, and I asked them 2 questions. I asked them, what is the meaning of life? And they say, to find your gift. And then I ask, what is the purpose of life? And they say, to give it away. The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to then share that gift with the rest of the world, right? Yes. It's a quote that I love from Pablo Picasso, right? One of my favorite quotes. What I write about is really, how do we as leaders, as executives, as team members, how do we tap into our gift? And then how do we share that with the rest of the world? So what I look for are what I think are exceptional leaders, people who have sort of not only just coasted into success, but they've gone through a lot of stress, they've gone through a lot of failure, they've gone through a lot of mistakes. And the reason that I focus on that is because I really believe that success, while success is very wonderful, it is also a lousy teacher. The people who have the most to share in life tend to be the ones who have gone through a lot of struggle. Right? They tried something and it didn't work. And now they understand why it didn't work, and they took those lessons and they applied it, right? And now when they applied it, they were able to reach an even higher level. So I tend to look for leaders, executives, musicians, artists, people who are achieving at the highest level, but didn't always have a very smooth path to success. They hit a lot of roadblocks in between, because I think that that's more relatable. As readers, we're all facing challenges. We're all facing struggles. right? And so more important than hearing about just how people succeeded, we also want to hear how people struggled, right? What challenges did they face? What mistakes did they make? And then how did they overcome those mistakes in order to become the best version of themselves?
Great, Sunil. If you're a leader, what's the best way so that the people that work with you, that are with you, can follow your projects or your ideas?
Yeah, you can go to my website. It's just sunnelgupta.com. And I keep it up to date. And you can also follow me on Instagram as well. I put a lot of what I try to do is I put a lot of the sort of latest thinking that I have and the latest research that I'm finding. I try to put those out there. I believe that I have the best job in the world because I'm a permanent student. That's what I am. I learn and then I try to apply immediately when I'm learning. So, being the founder and CEO of Rise, a big part of what I was doing is I was studying the behaviors of some of the most extraordinary people on the planet, and then I was putting that out there for other people to learn as well. And so if you follow me or if you go to my website, you'll see a lot of that latest thinking.
Fantastic. We are almost there in terms of the time. This is 18 minutes program, so it's very, very strict on that. But before we leave this conversation with you, Sunil, we would like to know how was your experience selling something that you created as the app Rise to Amazon? How was the experience, the main lessons you learned from that, and what are the next steps for you professionally in terms of wellness?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like many startups that succeed, we sort of kind of believe that they were overnight successes, right? But the reality is that a lot of companies, they start off very, very slow and it doesn't work for a long period of time. And then all of a sudden things start to happen, things start to work. And that's exactly what happened for us. We first 18 months, I had no idea if this was going to work. What we were building was one-on-one health coaching right over your mobile phone. So right over your phone, we connected you to a private health coach, and then you interacted with this health coach. And, this was 2012 when I started the company. And, there wasn't a lot like that out there. It was pretty new. It was so new that Apple actually asked me to come into their headquarters and present to Tim Cook and his team on what it is that I was building because they hadn't seen anything like it before. But whenever you're new, whenever you're creating something new, that can also be hard, right? Because you're trying to shape an industry. You're trying to sort of move things in a certain direction. And that can be a hard thing to do. So we struggled for a while. And then in 2015, we ended up partnering with Michelle Obama. And at that time, Michelle Obama was First Lady at the White House, and she was championing all sorts of work around obesity. And so we ended up partnering with her and became her official technology partner. And that ended up really sort of taking us off. We ended up becoming sort of much better known. People started to hear about us. Apple named us the best app of the year in 2015. And so it really started to sort of roll from there. And, that put us on the radar of companies like One Medical and ultimately of Amazon. But it also just, to me, I think showed one really key thing. One very important lesson that I learned from that entire experience was that we helped tens of thousands of people get into better physical health, right? And people, when they came to our platform, when they came to our service, they wanted to lose weight, they wanted to manage their diabetes, they wanted to manage their cholesterol. But when they achieved success, when they lost weight or they were able to lower their A1C level, what would happen is they would usually write a note send us some feedback. And I would read all of that feedback. And the thing that I found that was surprising was that when someone lost weight, usually they weren't writing back to say, hey, I fit better into my jeans. I feel better in my clothes. What they were writing to say is because I lost weight, I became a better leader. I became a better manager. I became a better parent. I became a better spouse. And it really brought me back to this idea that, look, well-being and work are not as disconnected as we thought. If we feel good about our physical body, if we feel good inside, then we end up doing our best work. And oftentimes when we do our best work, we start to feel more motivated to feel better physically as well. So these two things, they're not separate, but they're very much connected.
Great. I love your history of your app and all of the ideas that you have shared with us, Sunnel. Thank you very much. Amigos de 18 minutos, encantados de que estén con nosotros. Mauricio.
Gran conversación, gracias y nos vemos la próxima oportunidad.
Sí, amigos de La Medir, de Smart Speakers y de Mundo Ejecutivo. Hasta la próxima. Bye, Sunnel.
Thank you, Francisco. Bye, Mauricio.
Bye.
Mundo Ejecutivo presentó